This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 9th of April, 2021, and I am 2J.
I'm 2M.
And I am GK. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, Ruto meets Raila Man. In the Standard, they took my kidney. And in the Star, SK Macharia in 1.2 billion shilling feud with grandson.
Could I suggest that we just instantly toss the Star for being speculative, gossip mongering,
It's none of our
invasive?
business.
Yeah.
So we have a 3-part criteria that we're going to use to break down the headlines. We'll ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy? What are we discussing today?
Now, 8 years ago today, President Uhuru Kenyatta was sworn in as Kenya's 4th president. Since then, much has changed. Kenya has grown immensely. Uhuru has in 8 years doubled Kenya's GDP. He has built more kilometers of road than his predecessors and colonialists built. Combined.
Wow.
He has built more rail than all 3 of his predecessors built. Combined. He is building a bigger port than the colonialists and all 3 of his predecessors ever saw. Combined. This has connected more homes to power than Kenya has ever had.
Combined. Whatever that means.
For goodness sake, Kenya is now an arms manufacturer.
Right, yeah.
I mean, Kenya now has its own version of Smith & Wesson.
What's it called?
It's called something CZ or something of that nature.
So it needs a fancier name.
It needs a fancier name,
yeah. We'll call it Kukukaranga. Anyway, but in the same vein, he has faced more than any other president has ever faced. Terror attacks from Mandera to Garissa to Westgate to Disit to Mpeketoni. The terror carnage has been nasty. Uhuru has faced a global pandemic that has killed more people in Kenya than 2008 post-election violence. He has faced a pandemic that has nearly wiped out Kenya's economic gains. But even more sadly, he has faced stiff rebellion from his own deputy. Someone charged by the Constitution to be his principal assistant, and he has still remained graceful. Jomo Moi Kibaki wouldn't have tolerated a belligerent deputy. Uhuru, however, must be seeing a bigger picture somewhere there. And in all of this, Uhuru has not wavered, and he hasn't wavered because he isn't done yet. And you know why he's not done yet? Because MARAGA said so. And who am I to complain?
Oh, wow.
So MARAGA handed you...
How did you just leave it on a cliffhanger like that? You're not going to elaborate, explain further?
Nope.
You're going to leave Kenyans to stew with that?
Yes.
All right. Interesting. So I guess congratulations to the president.
Absolutely.
8 years.
8 years.
8 years of absolute success.
Yeah, very true. And that wasn't on any of the headlines. I guess that's also the point, right? Can there be any sense of positivity with them?
Yeah, I mean, they're all Malenge newspaper.
Right. So I think GK and I are going to take a bit of a tangent and look more at the politics of the day, which still, I guess we can give to the credit of the president himself, somewhere in there.
Absolutely.
And here at the Fort Hall School of Government, we served notice that the 2022 election will be a runoff election. But more importantly, this will be an election of high bargaining and coalition building.
Yes.
As it stands, each presidential candidate has a value proposition in the form of votes. But the numbers prove that none of those who have come forward so far can do it alone. And this is where coalitions are going to be critical.
That's correct.
But the question is, coalitions now or coalitions later?
Yes.
So I would suggest let's take a look at One Africa Alliance, for example. Mudavadi, Wetangula, Musyoka, and Gideon Moi have agreed to a coalition of sorts. But yet they have all staked a claim at the presidency.
Correct.
Does this make sense? But this is what is known as a split vote. Because they all represent a similar stronghold, Gideon Moi aside. And they are actually muddying the waters. By all running for president, they are dividing the votes between them and reducing the chances that either one of them could win.
Correct.
What does this mean? It means that we are guaranteed a runoff in 2022. The Constitution explains in Article 138 that a candidate will be declared president if they receive more than 50% of all votes, and the same in other counties.
That's correct.
If this does not happen, a runoff with the 2 top candidates is declared.
Yes.
So the issue going forward, should each candidate run and let the strongest among them emerge after the runoff? Or should someone step aside now and become a kingmaker? This because they know they cannot win, but they have the ability to determine who can. Here is some food for thought from our history. The 2007 election saw 9.8 million Kenyans vote, and the three frontrunners were Kibaki, Raila, and Musyoka. The result of the election saw Kibaki ahead of Raila by only 290,000 votes.
Yes.
But Raila would have won if there wasn't a spoiler in the race. One Kalonzo Musyoka. He received a total of 870,000 votes. He was inconsequential as a candidate. He was never going to win.
Yes.
He entered the race and occupied those 870,000 votes that would have gone to Raila instead.
Yes.
With those votes, Raila would have won by a landslide.
Yeah.
So what is the learning point? If Kalonzo was smart, he would have read the numbers, played the game, and become a kingmaker. He would have removed himself from the race, knowing that he was handing Raila a win in exchange for some benefit. And this is exactly what he decided to do in 2013. That year, he ran as Raila's running mate, and so he consolidated their two voting blocks. But unfortunately, this lesson came one election cycle too late, as Uhuru Kenyatta was the wild card that won the race. So what is my point? Splitting the vote is going to unleash the effects of natural selection. Only the strongest will survive, and the runoff will guarantee that. But if somebody wants to be smart, they should start by considering how they can leverage their voting block and try to become a kingmaker.
Interesting. And I think yesterday we spoke a lot about kingmakers and how gamma in any sort of ethnic arithmetic becomes a crucial kingmaker.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Without themselves being on that candidate.
Oh, absolutely.
So today I wish to address the phenomenon of coalition making a little bit, sort of in the same vein as 2J. The Daily Nation told us that Ruto met Raila Man and speculated that negotiations were ongoing. In the next few months, anyone meeting up for a coffee will be accused of creating an alliance.
Yes.
I can see this.
Yeah.
And while previously the electorate has understood how power is organized and exercised between the elites, the waters seem clear as mud now. And that's what TJ was saying.
Yeah.
Yet there are two major events in our horizon. One, there's the amendment of the constitution. And two, we have the election, if it happens, in 2022.
Yeah.
Despite curfews, the political establishment has been busy at work.
Oh, yes.
If 2022 is a successor election, what can we expect? We usually expect the politics of pre-electoral coalition making. And here at the Fifth Estate, we always say that only the weak-minded believe that politics is a place of collaboration.
Oh, yes.
We also know that a good coalition must be beneficial to all of its constituent parts.
Yeah.
There must be something in it for everybody.
Yeah.
But here at the Fifth Estate, we want to hypothesize that the political establishment should look at another strategy. And this one is called post-election bargaining. In this scenario, every member of the One Alliance, or whatever it's called, should go it alone, giving Kenyans more options at the ballot, perhaps even a chance to move beyond the two tribes.
Absolutely.
So the last election taught us that pre-electoral coalitions such as NASA can flop bigly and have very little payoff for its constituent parts.
Absolutely.
Kalonzo, Mudavadi and Raila should actually consider seriously what Seneca once said. If you have more to lose than to gain, then you are in a state of fragility. Will each politician have more to gain if they waited till after the election to go into a post-election coalition? I know the strategic worry is something 2J brought up, the idea of splitting the vote. However, I would argue that if BBI is actually in place, then the bargaining chips or the stakes are much higher in a post-election bargaining scenario because each will have brought their worth in votes in round one of the election. But they will, we wonder, and I wonder, will they actually learn from history or are they doomed to repeat it? Anyway, here's some food for thought for the weekend. Man is the only animal that can remain on friendly terms with the victims he intends to eat until he eats them. Lastly, I want to ask, Ruto has been so quiet.
Right?
He should have an agenda, even if it's to do nothing.
You know what's really interesting? If you look at the philosophy around this idea of splitting the vote, they talk about that the problem with it is that the electorate is forced to choose one candidate. You're not given the option to say, I like a bit of Mudavadi, a bit of Raila, a bit of Ruto. You're told you have to pick one and only one. And so the solution is to create an electoral system that is more open and more thoughtful. Do you know what the solution is?
What is it?
BBI.
BBI.
Right? With BBI, you're opening the table to more people. You're saying that you don't have to pick one candidate. You can pick a little bit of everyone and everybody's views are represented.
And then we do natural selection.
Exactly. Then we do natural selection.
There we go.
You know what, guys? The coalition, I saw you said that Ruto met Raila's man yesterday. That was Oparanya. And Ruto met Oparanya. So I want to do it. I have a name for their coalition. I think they should be called Panya Ya Hustlers.
And with that, we already tossed the star. Do we think that the Daily Nation or the Standard deserve?
Based on 2M's new coalition name, I want to go with the Daily Nation.
The Daily Nation.
Panya Ya Hustlers winning.
Or are we giving a new headline?
We'll give it. Panya Ya Hustlers, new headline.
In the Daily Matter.
Daily Matter. And now, final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled Reclaiming History, The Assassination of President John F. Kennedy by Vincent Bugliosi.
Yeah, before we go on to that, can I give a summary?
Please go ahead.
So this week we looked at assassinations that rocked the world. On Tuesday, we looked at the famous assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the hands of Gavrilo Princip, those are hard names, that triggered the beginning of World War I. We used the book The Trigger, Hunting the Assassin Who Brought the World to War by Tim Butcher to trace back the events on the fateful day of the assassination. We also took a look at the history of at the story of Princip in perspective, tracing back the history and radicalization of the man who some looked at as a hero and others saw as a terrorist. On Wednesday, we discussed the torture and assassination of Liberian leader Samuel Doe at the hands of Prince Johnson and his army. The assassination of Doe is known as the most notorious assassination in modern West African history. We reminded our viewers that Doe gained power through a bloody coup and lost it in similar fashion. His life and death exemplify the expression adapted from Jesus' words to Peter in Matthew 26:52, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. Right. And on Thursday, we analyzed the assassination of Indian leader Indira Gandhi. We began by looking at the lineage of her political family. Her grandfather and her father were leading the struggle for freedom under the Indian National Congress. Her father, Nehru, was the first Prime Minister of India. And as a leader, Gandhi was loyal to her nation. It was during Indira Gandhi's tenure that India became the third largest reservoir of skilled and scientific technical manpower, fifth military power, and the sixth member of the nuclear club, and the seventh in the race for space, and the 10th industrial power. And finally, we acknowledge that the likely cause of her assassination was Operation Blue Star, which put her at loggerheads with the Sikh community. And today we're in America with a very famous assassination.
Yeah, we take it back to what is called often the mother of all conspiracies, right? So at 1 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was pronounced dead after a sniper attack hit him and killed him during a motorcade as he passed through Dallas, Texas. The shooter was former U.S. Marine Lee Harvey Oswald. And as the author says in this book, that's probably the only fact that is generally agreed upon following his assassination, that he was killed, and he was killed by this man. Thereafter, everything gets a bit interesting. So by the fall of 1963, just for context, Kennedy was preparing for his next presidential campaign. Although he had not formally announced his candidacy, it was clear that he was going to run, and he was confident about his chances. So that's why he was in Texas on that day. But the president's body, unfortunately, was pronounced dead at 1 p.m. that day. And by 2:38 p.m., just 1 hour, 38 minutes later, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson had been sworn in as president. So on November 24th, only 2 days later, Oswald was scheduled to be transferred from the police headquarters to a county jail. Viewers across America tuned in to watch this process happening. But suddenly, a man jumped in with a pistol and fired at point-blank range at Oswald. And the assailant was identified as Jack Ruby. He was a local nightclub owner. Oswald died hours later in a hospital. So this story is very weird. JFK dies, the person who assassinated him is then killed by another random assailant. So later on, President Johnson sets up this thing called the Warren Commission after he was assassinated to investigate how he had been killed. But many people to date do not believe the results that this commission came up with. So Lyndon says in phone calls that later came out many years later that he was not convinced about what had happened. He said that a conspiracy was at the root of the assassination, and he did not want the country to be rushed into action either against the Soviet Union or Cuba. And so he said, we need to investigate what happened and understand it. So after a year of investigation, the Warren Commission come out with their results, and they say that Oswald acted alone. Again, the public do not believe this. And so many conspiracy theories suggest that the assassination involved more than one person, not Oswald alone. Most current theories suggest that it was the FBI, the CIA, the US military themselves, the Mafia, which I think 2M will touch on, the Vice President Johnson as a way to get to the presidency himself, Fidel Castro, the KGB, or any combination of all together. But in this book, the author is completely anti-conspiracy. And the purpose of this book is to dissect and analyze the assassination itself and the rise of conspiracy theories in the following years. The author estimates that a total of 42 groups, 82 assassins, 214 people have been accused at one time or another as being responsible for the assassination itself. And as I said, people refer to this as the mother of all conspiracies. 70% of the American public believe that there was some cover-up involved in this assassination. And the author estimates that between 1,000 to 2,000 books have been written about this, and 95% of them are pro-conspiracy and anti this Warren Commission itself.
Absolutely.
The only thing I will say is, I sniff something that doesn't make sense.
That doesn't make sense.
After reading into all of the different and various conspiracy theories, whether wild or sane, something doesn't add up.
You know, Tujay, even before I read this book, my suspicion was the Mafia. And I want to say this, and of all the conspiracy theories I believe the most, the guy responsible for all of them was the Mafia. The Mafia did it. And the CIA and FBI let it happen for their own reasons. But bottom line, the Mafia, in my view, was responsible for JFK's assassination. And there's a reason why. And here it is. Once upon a time, there was a man known as Carlos Marcello, better known as Calleguero Minasore by his Italian mates. This man was the leader of the Mafia in New Orleans. He also doubled up as a Louisiana gambling network's boss. Marcello was a crime boss. The man had a rap sheet. In 1929, he was arrested for bank robbery by the police in New Orleans. In 1938, Marcello was arrested and charged with the sale of more than 23 pounds of narcotics. He just got a $76,000 fine and some jail time.
He got off easy?
Got off easy, a slap on the wrist. As a result, on 24th March 1959, Marcello appeared before the Senate Committee investigating organized crime. Serving as chief counsel to the committee was Robert F. Kennedy. His brother, Senator John F. Kennedy, was a member of the committee. In response to the committee questioning, Marcello invoked the Fifth Amendment in refusing to answer any questions relating to his background, activities, and associates. After becoming president, John F. Kennedy appointed his brother, Robert Kennedy, as U.S. Attorney General. They wasted no time. This time around, the Fifth Amendment did not save him. In March 1961, Robert Kennedy authorized Marcello's deportation to Guatemala, the country Marcello had falsely listed as his birthplace. On 4th April, Marcello was arrested by the authorities and deported to Guatemala. Robert Kennedy did not know that Marcello's home country was actually in Africa. The guy was actually born in Tunisia, somewhere around 1910. But anyway, the smooth Marcello found his way back to the United States. He returned a bitter man, and he wanted revenge. I mean, how do you deport a whole mafia boss? What would other mafia bosses think of him? He had been humiliated by the Kennedys. When he got back, he revived his own networks. One of them was an FBI informant called Edward Becker. He told Edward Becker that a dog will continue to bite you if you cut off its tail, whereas if you cut the dog's head, it would cease to cause you trouble.
Wow.
Becker reported to the FBI that Marcelo clearly stated he was going to arrange to have President Kennedy taken out. Marcelo told another informant that he would need to take out insurance for the assassination by setting up a nut job to take the blame. That nut job was Lee Harvey Oswald, the alleged shooter. So what makes me think it was Marcelo that did it? Marcelo had motive. Just before Kennedy was assassinated on 22nd November 1963, Marcelo made contact with a man called Jack Ruby in New Orleans. Jack Ruby was a guy you said was a nightclub owner, and he had ties to the Mafia. They met with another Mafia leader known as Santos Traficante about a problem he was having. Also, they also met in New Orleans at the time where JFK's assassin, who was called Lee Harvey Oswald, was also at. In fact, it is said that Oswald and Ruby, weeks before the assassination of Kennedy, had met at Florida Key West Airport and were had talking in code on their way to Cuba. Anyway, weeks later, JFK was gunned down. Oswald is arrested and accused of pulling the trigger. 2 days later, as Tuje said, Oswald was being moved to a county jail. Ruby shows up at the county jail with a concealed .38 revolver and shoots Oswald to death. When asked why he did it, he says, oh, he was distraught over JFK's death. Of course, the bugger was lying. But what happened later with the investigation is what made me think that the FBI and CIA were complicit. When the investigation was done, the FBI concluded that there was no connection between Marcelo, Ruby, or Oswald. On the flip side, however, Marcelo and Ruby had links to the FBI and local police. In any case, if the FBI were aware through informants of Marcelo's return from Guatemala, why did they not apprehend him? It is simple. They needed him to finish off a job. Period.
Okay. Wow. So for you, the list of 42 in the book, this is the one that made the most sense.
Mafia and the FBI and the CIA knew exactly what happened.
Well, I can see why people are drawn to conspiracy theories. There's something very playful about them. 2M has given us a whole story, and there are many other people who will give you the Russian side, the Cuban side, you know, a version of, you know, who could have done it. But there's a beautiful part of this book, the last chapter, I think, and it's a neat little chapter. It looks at the coincidences between Lincoln's death and Kennedy's death. And it gives a list of over 20 things. I won't go into all of them. But it's interesting because he's trying to make a point. And the point is that there's no such thing as a coincidence in the conspiracy theorist's mind. Because for them, there are actual manifestations and evidence of two or more people coming together to carry out a mutual sort of insincere sort of sinister
there has
goal.
To be a link.
There has to be. It can't just be coincidence.
Absolutely.
However, he goes on now, the author, to list many coincidences between Lincoln and Kennedy, and I'll just say a few. Lincoln was elected president in 1860, Kennedy in 1960. Both Lincoln and Kennedy were elected president after each had unsuccessfully sought to get the vice presidency nomination of their party. Lincoln in 1856, Kennedy in 1956. Both Lincoln and Kennedy had served in the U.S. House of Representatives. Lincoln in 1846, Kennedy in 1946. The man Lincoln defeated to become president was called Stephen Douglas, who was born in 1813. The man Kennedy defeated to become president, Richard Nixon, was born in 1913.
But you're just making the point.
No, but listen. When both Lincoln and Kennedy were in their 30s, they both married pretty sophisticated 24-year-old brunettes. We all know famous Jackie O. I don't know who Lincoln's was. But I'll take his word for it. Both Lincoln and Kennedy had sons that passed away, died during their presidency. Lincoln's son, William, died at the age of 11. Kennedy's son, Patrick, died 2 days after his birth. And what's interesting is that both Lincoln and Kennedy sought equality for blacks. So you have Lincoln's case with the abolition of the slavery, the 13th Amendment, and we have Kennedy's case with the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act. Both Lincoln and Kennedy were murdered on a Friday. Both were shot in their head. Both were sitting down. Lincoln, on the day that he was killed, told an aide that he knew there were those who wanted him dead. If it is to be done, he said, it is impossible to prevent it. On the other hand, Kennedy, on the day of his murder, he told Jackie and an aide how it would be easy for someone to shoot him from a high building with a high-powered rifle.
Ooh.
And there's nothing anybody could do. Anyway, there's a whole list of all these things that go on. So listen, he says, and his point is, the above list helps conspiracy theorists realize that coincidences that seem to defy mathematical probabilities do happen in life.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a name for them. They're not conspiracies, they're coincidences. And that's why he makes this laborious sort of list showing all these coincidences. So I took that away from it. I thought it was interesting because it's easy to make a story, a phenomenon where none exists just by making things connect. Yeah. So I'll tell you a joke. So they get to heaven and they go, tell us, God, who really killed President Kennedy? God replies, listen, I'm just going to tell you one time and one time only. And then I want you to forget about this matter. Lee Harvey Oswald killed Kennedy and he acted alone. They nudge each other nervously and they say, oh my God, the conspiracy, it's bigger than we thought. And the idea here is conspiracies are boundless and they never end, but it's comforting to have something that in a world where you constantly feel like you lack control, these theories sort of help you gain some sort of control in your life. And that's why they continue to go on.
I'm a conspiracy theorist. Are you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you okay?
I don't believe that joke was so bad.
No, it was a good joke. It was. I mean, it shows the magnitude of how big conspiracy theories can get.
Yes.
If we're calling this the mother of all conspiracies,
even when you get to heaven and you think God isn't on it.
I'm not even an American, and I believe this conspiracy theory had nothing to do with me.
Absolutely no. JFK was taken out by the Mafia.
Oh Lord. Okay. Have a good weekend, guys. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, but also find us on TV. We're on GoTV Prime Feature.